I could hear every small sound in the darkness. The soft whoosh of my bedroom door opening, her careful footsteps trying to avoid the creaky floorboard near my dresser, even the whisper of papers being moved in my safe. I kept my eyes barely open. Before we continue, like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. She opened the safe and froze. Inside, waiting for her, was just my mini camera with its red recording light and my dated inventory list. She had no idea every move was being filmed. I never thought I'd catch my own daughter-in-law stealing from me, until I saw her hands inside my safe and the look on her face when she realized what she'd found. My name is Clara. At 62, I thought I could spot a liar from a mile away. I was wrong. My son and his wife had been living with me since Harold passed, and I'd been blind to what was happening right under my nose. But practical doesn't always mean peaceful. My daughter-in-law had a way of making me feel like a guest in my own home. She'd rearrange my kitchen cabinets when I wasn't looking, claiming she was just trying to help organize. She'd invite her friends over without asking, filling my living room with their loud conversations and leaving rings on my coffee table. When I mentioned these things to my son, he'd give me that patient smile and suggest I was being too sensitive. The real trouble started 2 months ago when I noticed small things going missing. Nothing dramatic. A silver letter opener from my desk, a crystal paperweight Harold had given me, a pair of pearl earrings I'd left on my dresser. Each time I asked about them, my daughter-in-law would look genuinely confused and offer to help me search. We'd look together, and sometimes the items would turn up in strange places, like my earrings in the kitchen drawer or the paperweight in the basement. What she didn't know was that I'd been watching her for weeks. I started paying closer attention to her patterns. She worked part-time at a boutique downtown, but her schedule seemed flexible enough that she was often home alone during my Tuesday afternoon book club meetings. Those Tuesdays became particularly interesting to me. 6 weeks ago, I decided to test something. I left a vintage brooch on my bedroom dresser. Nothing too valuable, but distinctive enough that I'd notice if it moved. Sure enough, after my next book club meeting, the brooch was gone. When I mentioned it at dinner, she suggested that maybe I'd put it somewhere safe and forgotten. That's when I installed the small security camera in my bedroom, hidden behind a picture frame that faced my dresser and had a clear view of my walk-in closet where the safe was located. Harold had insisted on that safe years ago, built right into the closet wall behind a false panel. It looked like regular shelving unless you knew where to press. The camera wasn't expensive, just something I ordered online, and my neighbor's teenage grandson helped me install it when I told him I was worried about break-ins. That boy never suspected what I really planned to catch. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd probably catch nothing more than dust settling. But I needed to know. Last week, I had my answer. But that wasn't the first time I'd caught her. I was supposed to be at my cardiologist appointment that Thursday afternoon. But doctor. Peterson had to reschedule at the last minute due to an emergency. Instead of calling home, I decided to run some errands and return quietly. I wanted to see if my suspicions were justified. I parked down the street and slipped in through the back door, moving carefully through my own house like an intruder. The sounds led me upstairs. Soft footsteps, the creak of my bedroom floorboards, the whisper of my closet door opening. When I reached my bedroom doorway, I saw her crouched in front of the open safe, her hands moving quickly through the contents. Papers, jewelry boxes, the cash I kept for emergencies. She was photographing everything with her phone, her face focused and efficient. But the real shock wasn't what she took. It was what she left behind. She was being careful, I realized, not stealing outright, but documenting everything. Taking pictures of my financial statements, my will, the deed to the house, even Harold's old business papers. This wasn't random theft. This was intelligence gathering. My heart pounded as I watched her work with practiced ease. She photographed everything, then sent the pictures somewhere before carefully replacing each item. I slipped back downstairs and out the back door, moving slowly to avoid my creaky knees giving me away, gripping the banister tighter than I used to need to, then returned 15 minutes later through the front, calling out that I was home. She appeared in the kitchen almost immediately, flour on her hands, claiming she'd been baking cookies for my son's work colleagues. The cookies were store-bought. I could see the packaging in the trash. That evening, my neighbor's grandson helped me check the camera footage. The video confirmed everything I'd witnessed. Before leaving my room, she had made a phone call. Even though I couldn't hear clearly, I caught enough to know she was reporting about my financial situation. I thought I knew the worst of it until I opened that envelope. The next morning, while she was at work and my son was in class, I went through my safe more carefully. Everything appeared to be in place, but I noticed something I'd overlooked before. A small envelope tucked behind my jewelry boxes that I didn't remember putting there. Inside was a printed email conversation between my daughter-in-law and someone named Marcus, discussing my health situation and the timeline for property transfer. The emails referenced my recent cardiologist appointments and mentioned that I'd been having episodes, something I'd never discussed with her because I hadn't been having any episodes. The conversation included details about my will and speculation about how long it might take for my son to inherit the house. The most chilling part was her response to Marcus asking about moving the timeline forward. She'd written that she was working on it and that I'd been more confused lately, mentioning incidents I had no memory of because they'd never happened. That's when I understood what was really happening. She wasn't just planning to wait for me to die naturally. She was building a case that I was becoming mentally incompetent, gathering evidence to support a claim that my son needed to take over my affairs sooner rather than later. The missing items, the confusion about where I'd put things, the suggestions that I was forgetting conversations, it was all part of a larger plan. The name on those papers wasn't the one I expected to see. Marcus, according to the email headers, was a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. He specialized in elder law and guardianship cases. My daughter-in-law had been consulting with him about the legal process for having me declared incompetent and getting my son appointed as my guardian and financial guardian. The emails revealed that this had been going on for months, long before I'd noticed anything amiss. She had been logging every time I'd misplaced something or forgotten a minor detail, building a file that painted me as increasingly confused and unable to manage my own affairs. But there was something else in those emails that made my blood run cold. References to helping things along and creating more incidents suggested that she wasn't just passively waiting for me to decline. She was actively working to make me appear more confused than I actually was. My hands shook as I held those emails, my coffee growing cold as the reality sank in. How many times had I questioned my own memory recently? All the moments when I'd wondered if I was starting to lose my mental sharpness. How many of those doubts had been planted by her careful setups? That evening at dinner, I watched my son and daughter-in-law with new eyes. My son seemed genuinely oblivious to what was happening, but I noticed how she would subtly correct me when I mentioned plans or appointments, how she'd exchange meaningful glances with him when I couldn't remember some trivial detail. Every time I questioned myself about a missing item, every moment I wondered if my memory was failing. It had all been her careful work, while building a legal case to take control of my life and my assets. But she had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. Over the following week, I quietly gathered my own evidence. I made copies of everything in that envelope, asked my helpful neighbor to install one more camera near the front door, and started documenting every interaction I had with her. I also reached out to my own lawyer, someone Harold and I had worked with for years, and set up a private meeting. What I learned during that meeting changed everything. My lawyer explained that guardianship cases could move quickly if family members claimed I was becoming confused and provided evidence of my declining abilities. But there was something else my lawyer told me that sparked an idea. He mentioned that attempted elder financial exploitation, especially when combined with psychological manipulation, was a serious crime in our state. If I could prove that she was deliberately trying to make me appear incompetent for financial gain, she could face felony charges. That's when I decided to turn the tables. I started playing into her expectations, acting slightly more confused than usual, misplacing things more obviously, asking the same questions twice. But I made sure to do it only when she was around, and I documented everything. I wanted her to feel confident that her plan was working. At the same time, I was building my own case. I had the security footage, the copied emails, and now I was gathering evidence of her ongoing setups. I also scheduled a full cognitive check with my doctor, making sure to establish that my mental function was completely normal. 2 days ago, I overheard her on the phone with Marcus again. This time, I was ready with a recording device. She was telling him that my condition was deteriorating more rapidly and that my son was starting to worry about my safety. She suggested they should move forward with the guardianship paperwork within the next month. Yesterday, I put my plan into action. I told her that I was going to visit my sister for the weekend, something I'd been talking about for weeks. Instead, I checked into a hotel nearby and watched my house through the security cameras I'd installed. As I expected, within hours of my supposed departure, she was back in my safe, this time removing documents entirely. That's when I called the police. When the officers arrived at my house, they found her in my bedroom with my financial documents spread across my bed, my jewelry box open, and my emergency cash in her purse. She tried to explain that she was just organizing things for me, that I'd asked her to help with my paperwork because I was getting confused. But I was there to contradict her story, along with my lawyer and all the evidence I'd gathered over the past month. The look on my son's face when he arrived home to find police cars in our driveway was something he will never forget. The betrayal, the confusion, the dawning realization that his wife had been manipulating both of us. It broke my heart to see him learn the truth this way. She was arrested on charges of attempted elder financial exploitation, theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The evidence against her was overwhelming. The emails with Marcus, the security footage, the recordings of her phone conversations, and the cognitive check that proved my mental competency. But the real revelation came during her interrogation. She confessed that this wasn't her first time targeting an elderly family member. She'd successfully had her own grandmother declared incompetent 2 years before meeting my son, gaining control of the woman's assets before she died. That's where she'd learned the process, refined her techniques, and built her relationship with Marcus. She'd married my son specifically because she'd researched his family and knew about the property and investments I'd inherited from Harold. The whirlwind romance, the quick marriage, the suggestion that they move in with me, it had all been part of a calculated plan. My son was devastated. He genuinely loved her, trusted her completely, and had no idea that he was being used as a pawn in her scheme. The divorce papers were filed within a week. Today, as I sit in my kitchen drinking my morning coffee, I can't help but think about how differently things could have gone. If I hadn't trusted my instincts, if I hadn't been strong enough to investigate and fight back, I might have ended up spending my final years in a care facility while she and Marcus sold off everything Harold and I had worked for. But there's something else that keeps running through my mind. She had been so careful, so methodical in her approach. She'd studied the legal system, learned how to manipulate both institutions and individuals, and almost pulled off a perfect crime. How many other elderly people had fallen victim to similar schemes? How many families had been torn apart by predators who use love and trust as weapons? But here's what haunts me most. She almost convinced me I was losing my mind. Have you ever had someone make you question your own memory? Sometimes the people closest to us know exactly which buttons to push.